Well, joining me today is Congressman Brett Guthrie. He represents Kentucky's 2nd Congressional District. He's also the chairman of the House Energy and Commerce Committee, where he really serves as an important voice on healthcare policy. Congressman, it is great to see you again. Thanks for being with us for Faces of Gene Therapy.
It's great to see you. Thanks for inviting me to be here.
Well, maybe we can just start off. I know you recently introduced the Medicaid for VBPs for Patient Act, or the MVP Act. And
Right.
as you know, this is bipartisan legislation focusing on expanding value-based purchasing agreements in Medicaid. How will this approach help states manage the cost of breakthrough therapies like gene and cell therapies while also ensuring that patients can access them quick and soon?
Well, it's incredibly important, its ability for states to do this. And here's the thing. So I think the first time I had this brought to my attention were people that had gene therapies for cures for hemophilia and also for sickle cell, particularly sickle cell I focused on. I had a friend who had a son that had sickle cell. And it's an upfront expense, but not only does it change the person's life, that's what's important, but it also is a lifetime of savings of not being sick anymore and having to go through the Medicaid system. And so here was the issue that states have. We have this upfront expense, even though we may save money on the back end. You know how government does. They count money you spend this year, not money you save next year. And so we thought it was a good opportunity to put this in place in Medicaid where groups can have agreements and sit down and say, I had the group that worked on the hemophilia who said, we would be willing to say, if you spend this money up front, this is what you're going to save on the back end, and we'll commit to some portion of that and share. If it doesn't work, we share in the expense. If it does work, then we share in the benefit.
Yeah, it's great. It certainly makes a lot of sense, and it looks like that could be a path forward with bipartisan support. So thanks for moving that initiative.
Thank you. Yes, it seems self-evident to most people. If you can put money up front and save money over the long term, it would make sense. But you know how governments operate. So sometimes we operate year to year and budget to budget.
Right, right. Well, let me ask you this. Many families living with rare diseases see hope. They do see hope for these new potential curative treatments that are emerging. However, they can still struggle to access these treatments based on where they live. Can you talk a little bit about how the recently enacted new law, the Accelerating Kids Access to Care Act, may reduce some of those barriers?
Well, that's really important. You look at an area like mine. Kentucky has a lot of border states. We have wonderful hospitals in Kentucky and Louisville, Lexington, University of Kentucky U of L, public hospitals. But also, I'm an hour from Vanderbilt. So you got moms and dads living in my area have access to one of the world's great hospitals, children's hospitals particularly, just south of you, an hour, and they're going to say you got to go somewhere else and you got to just to stay in state. If you live in northern Kentucky, which is the suburban Cincinnati area, as we call it, northern Kentucky, if a ball player hits a baseball out of Great American Ballpark, it actually lands in Kentucky. But if a parent living right there wants to send, because the Ohio River is all ours, but if a parent lives on the south bank of the Ohio River and wants to take their child to a world-class children's hospital in Cincinnati, then you weren't guaranteed coverage because you're out of state. So we wanted to make sure every kid had access to the best care. The best care can be in most convenient care and the most local care. Then it could be miles down the road, or it could be right next door. And so it doesn't make sense for somebody from my area to have to go to other areas when you have Vanderbilt right there, or from young people in northern Kentucky to have to go somewhere else when the world-class Cincinnati Hospital is right there as well.
Yeah, that sure makes sense. And so this new law will help credential some of the physicians maybe that are across these state borders, right? And make it easy.
Exactly. So it doesn't just lock you into a Medicaid program because you're a Kentucky Medicaid. So you have to go to a local in-state hospital because, negotiate rates, negotiate Medicaid rates. You have Medicare agreements, which private sector, we have Medicaid managed care, which we didn't have when I was in the General Assembly and was kind of working on Medicaid, I said Medicare. And so this makes this easier for all of them.
Yeah, that's good. Gene therapies and other advanced treatments often do involve one-time cost, but also long-term health benefits. How do you think Congress and policymakers can help better incentivize the potential for these therapies to help bend the cost curve?
Well, that's what we got to focus on. So as you know, in Congress particularly, we look at a 10-year budget window, and everything has to happen within the 10-year budget window. But if you have someone who's going to lose their kidneys, then The cost of that over the lifetime of the person is astronomical. But if you can do whatever, if it's a gene issue that's causing you to lose your kidneys, if you can save those and turn them off, it's money up front, but you save money over time. And what we have to begin to do, just in everything we do here in Washington, particularly in these kinds of areas, is look at the overall cost of the treatment. You can't say, as I said earlier with Medicaid, if you're a state government, and some states do 2-year budgets, Kentucky does, some states do 1-year budget, we're going to allocate this for the first year or two, and that's too much money from a budgeting perspective, not to mention the human health side of it, which is vital and the most important. But just from a budgeting standpoint, you say, well, we can't spend this money up front because it's going to run us to the deficit or whatever it does to you, when you're really leaving money on the table because you're going to save it on the end. And the reason you save it on the end is because that person's not having to get care because they're not sick anymore. And that should be the top priority. But also the way that we budget affects these things as well. And it helps if we budget correctly, that we factor in the overall total cost of care over a person's lifetime is where we need to go.
Yeah, that's really exciting because, a one-time treatment that could offer potential cures, right, takes care of chronic care costs for a disease for a long period of time, right? You could have a lot of value saved there. Yeah.
Well, because for instance, if somebody said, hey, today we have a cure for Alzheimer's, and everybody in the country, if we did it, would cost you $100 billion. I'm throwing a number out. Now it's going to save you $3 trillion over 10 years, which is $1 trillion. So $100 billion over 10 would be, so you save $2 trillion. The budget system doesn't let you do that. And that's what we have to make sure. They say, oh, you're spending too much money, you're running up the deficit. No, we're investing in people, which is the primary issue, but we're also making wise investment of the hard taxpayer dollars. That's what we have to focus on.
Well, likewise, as medical innovation accelerates, from gene therapies to personalized medicine, what additional policy steps do you believe Congress should consider to ensure that programs like Medicaid keep pace with the science and deliver these breakthroughs to patients who need access them to, the most? So in other words, how do we best ensure the healthcare system is keeping up with advances in science?
Well, we have to have the access to treatments, and we have to have them. And so, the president talks about right to try. I just had a person came in the other, people come in every day with these new genetic changes, and where they actually take the genetic DNA out of a tumor, train the immune system to go fight that specific DNA. So your immune system goes and fights the tumor. That's out there. They've seen some success. And the question is, how do you just get that approved? How do you get it through the system? And the right to try. I mean, if you're trying to, I'm kind of sniffling a little bit because I got the trees are blooming today. So if you got some kind of experimental medicine that can cure allergies, keep me from sniffling, but you don't know the side effects, I get it, the long-term studies. But if you have somebody given a 6 month to a year to live, or a young person who's got Duchenne's muscular dystrophy, and once they're in a wheelchair, you're never going to get them out of it, but there's some potential to stop the progression, time is of the essence. And that's what we need to focus on with our FDA to get those approved, to try to make sure that we have timely approvals so that people can get access to care some of them have no other hope. And that's what we want to make sure people have hope, not false hope. A lot of times you see promising medicines that just never materialize. But sometimes things really do seem to materialize and gives people hope, and we need to expedite that.
And as many gene therapy companies are being created right here in America, and they're doing their manufacturing in emerging biotech hubs throughout the United States. Mm-hmm. In a time where China is also accelerating its focus on biotech, can gene therapy be an area where America preserves its leadership in biotechnology?
Oh, absolutely. I was just talking to some major pharmaceutical companies about leading against China. And so, but it also is extremely important that we know that a lot of emerging technologies, come from small companies. It's usually somebody in a lab that figures something out, a professor that figures something out. I had a person yesterday that was an entrepreneur and sold his business, and his father had this other issue, so invested in a certain cure for a certain type of cancer. And so it's not necessarily the big major pharmaceutical companies doing this although they do good work doing this every day. It's a lot of small entrepreneurial, as you talked about. And that's where we need to make sure our policies are right. They can't go without being funded. They can't go without getting the reimbursements that they need. And there's a whole ecosystem of that other countries don't have. China's trying to replicate. So we can't do the things, we got to have policy that doesn't slow our innovators down, because we have competition from China, and they're serious and they want to be number one. And I'm serious that I don't want to do anything that helps them become number one, because we're the best and we need to be the best and continue to be the best.
Well, thank you for your leadership, not only on behalf of innovators, but that are coming up with new cures, but most importantly for the patients, right, that are looking for that hope for curing a rare disease.
Those are the beneficiaries of it all. You're absolutely right.
Right.
And you see parents with young children just distraught when they trying to find some opportunity. When there's hope, you want to make sure the parents have the opportunity to get their children that access.
Well, thanks for your continued leadership, and we look forward to keeping in touch.
Well, thank you. I really appreciate you inviting me to be on.
All right. That's something.